All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody's Thursday is going well so far. I mean, likewise with your whole week and tomorrow and the weekend. Let's try to keep it positive. We are going to get started in about maybe 30 seconds, a minute or so. There are some others that we're expecting on this call, so we'll just give them a moment or so to pop in. For some introductions, I actually do recognize almost everybody's name here. So we probably engaged in the past. My name is Chase Berman. I'm FutureFeed Success Manager. I'll be the one going through the training session for end user training 2 this afternoon. The session is being recorded and it will be sent to everybody that attends. I think it'll probably be sent to you a couple of hours from now once the session concludes and Zoom digests it. But expect to get an email from Zoom that will be providing the recording link. If you do have any issues accessing that recording link, please let me know or email support@futurefeed.co, and we're happy to help with that. All right, so at this stage in the game, I don't want to assume this for everybody, but I'll make a small assumption that you've been using FutureFeed for a little bit of time now, or maybe you've been using it for a while. But ideally, you've already gone through FutureFeed training 1 for end users, which for those of you that were on Tuesday's session, you're seeing me again, so I hope you're not sick of me yet. But we're going to be able to go through the second half of the platform today as I share my screen. And we're going to be able to pick up from where things left off in the last session. So part of what I absolutely welcome everybody to do as a part of this session is to ask questions as we're going through the different sections of FutureFeed. I want to make sure that we take full advantage of the hour that we have today. The more collaboration that we have during these sessions, usually the more you yourselves as the attendees and participants would benefit. You might be surprised how important a question you may ask could be to somebody else on this call. So we're all in here for the same reasons of using FutureFeed and to get your organizations compliant and then maintaining that over time. Right, so just to briefly summarize what was touched on in end user training 1, we went through really describing what the compliance dashboard page will encapsulate, how the information will appear more over time as you're entering data, primarily in the assess section, so adjusting the objective statuses, and how you can view the different information for what either you as a user are particularly assigned to via the racing model associations, tasks, or POA&M items. Having a team-wide view of all the different users that are associated to your tenant, the different items that they're playing a role in actually accomplishing. And likewise, with going through just entering initial information in the start section and then getting all of your users, the roles incorporated, associated to the users, and then adding team. We also did touch on adding different tools and services and documents. I actually think in Tuesday's session, we didn't fully cover everything. So if any participated a couple of days ago, I know I did say that I would send you the recording from a past session that covers everything for the last 20 minutes on those 2 things. I humbly apologize for not doing that yet. I have not forgotten, but thank you for your patience. So I'll be sending that by the end of this week, so you'll be able to have that at your disposal. So we're going to dive into the assess section, so your gap assessment, and really that live gap assessment is something that's really never fully done, even when you're at 100% or all the objectives are marked as met. Your organization is going to be maintaining its compliance requirements over time, so you can legitimately prove your compliance 5 minutes from now. If somebody comes knocking on the door and is like, please show me your documentation. So we're going to dive into everything for the assess section, viewing more in the live SSP, likewise with the your feed section. This is where the POA&M items are going to be listed, likewise for where you can manage them and group them into projects. And then we're going to be spending some time on viewing the different types of reports, or we call them deliverables, that you can generate from FutureFeed at any time. All right, so for assess, your organization is looking to address CMC level 2/NIST 800-171 revision 2, 110 controls, 320 objectives. That's a lot, but using FutureFeed will help expedite this process and make everything much more consumable of understanding the controls, how you can go about implementing them, what type of evidence is going to be associated to these different controls, but again, at the objective level. So this landing page, you're going to be able to see all the controls, and this is a breakdown for, from the color illustration perspective, really what's happening. Controls that have an objective 1 marked as not met, it's going to appear in red. For blue, nothing's been done to the objectives. So all the statuses, it has not been moved to met or not met. For green, when all of the objectives for a control are marked as met, you're going to see that color appear here. That's also when you're going to be given the whatever amount of SPURS score, 1, 3, or 5, for those particular controls, and that'll update up here on the top right for your SPURS score. If any controls are not applicable, you'll be able to mark it as such, and then you'll just be able to see those icons appear in gray here. So it's a lot of controls, and you will ideally be going through the process of associating or assigning users to these controls. Who's the sole accountable person for ensuring the entire control becomes met? And then who are going to be the ones consulted and informed? You can make those associations throughout the controls, but for those that are primarily going to be responsible and accountable for these actions, really the controls as a whole and the objectives within, it would be that you're actually associated to in that regard. This page doesn't illustrate that. You might end up wasting some time just trying to figure that out. You can go back to your individual responsibilities page, but that's somewhere else in the platform. Even if it's 5 seconds of wasted time, we don't want you to have to experience that. So to get all of that to not apply, simply go up here to this icon and you click it. That will switch the control view to the RACI model. So for any of the controls that you're associated to, in this case now the ACUBI, I'll enable that for all of them. I am applied to 3.1.1, and that's it. Controls, as I was saying for my previous example, that's going to give me the specific insight into the controls that I should be prioritizing my time and actions around, whether it's adding some information in there or doing any work to maybe some associated tools and services and documents, or completing tasks for those items that relate to the particular control or controls. So it's a great way to condense the view of the controls that you should be prioritizing your time in. But there could be a lot of changes made to these objective statuses over time, and especially well past even when you hopefully pass your assessment. So this objective status change history icon, this is a feature that will encapsulate all the changes that have happened to the different objectives throughout the entire life cycle of your tenant. So it will include the dates, the time, the specific user, their email, likewise with the objective that was changed, and then the particular status change that occurred. And it's just a way for you to have precise visibility, really from like an access log perspective, or sorry, not access log, a change log perspective. We're seeing the different changes that were made to these objectives. So we'll go back to this domain page. And I do want to touch on this bigger blue box on the right side, copy framework. So this is another way that you can really expedite the data entry process across the controls within the particular framework that you're viewing. So if there's information in 3.1.1 that might apply to 3.1.6, maybe it does. I am not an expert in that specific instance, so don't quote me on that. But you're able to actually copy information from one of the controls. This will just detail what this feature is going to be doing. You can select the framework. Oh my gosh, I sincerely apologize. I'm describing the wrong concept. I will get to copy framework later on. So it's not relevant to what I'm particularly describing. I'm talking about copy control. So we'll let this page load if that'll happen. I have been experiencing a little bit of issues with my internet over the last 2 days. So if something happens to my audio and I become a little bit scratchy, somebody please write in the chat so I'm aware. Tried resetting my ONT box earlier, but it doesn't seem to have anything. It does look like things are actually significantly slower than they were about 10 minutes ago. So I apologize if any inconvenience is caused here. Hopefully it won't be. So with the copy control functionality, you can click on this box for any of the controls. FutureFeed has already provided recommendations for you. For the other controls, information you're entering, either at the summary note level, the RACI model associations for the interview phase of the control, and the examine and test components. So the different documents that are going to be associated as supporting inventory. And then for the test, it's the different tools and services that are listed. You have the ability to copy this information of these 4 sections. You can pick and choose which ones you'd like to do to the controls that are listed on the left side. Now, we are making these recommendations. We're not all this. Somebody will still need to go through the 3-step approval process for this. And that's simply going from recommendations to the manual selection of the different types of data you want to copy over. And then somebody will then need to make the final review of, okay, our organization does want to proceed with these recommendations because the information does apply. And you simply click copy, and then that will make the changes to all of these controls stemming from the data, in this case 3.1.1, for all the different items that are marked with this green checkbox. It could be a really beneficial feature if you're looking to expedite data entry process just for this specific one framework. Now, to sort of finish my point about what I was describing about copy framework. So for those of you that have been with using FutureFeed for like some time now, and those of you that might be newer, you might have heard about FutureFeed's endeavors of adding additional frameworks. So ISO 27001 and 2, that's going to be right out the door in probably a couple of weeks. I don't think by CS5 or the Cyber AB event, the National Harbor, Maryland next week, but hopefully either by closer to the end of October or maybe the end of this month or in November. So ISO 27001 and 2 will be available for an additional like add-on purchase to your tenant as a framework. Likewise with NIST 853 revision 5, that'll come a little bit after ISO. And we'll be adding revision 3 for 800-171. There's no additional purchase for revision 3 because it's a revision of the framework you've ideally already purchased. You'll be able to see pricing information or like bundling options for add-on frameworks on our pricing page when we update that later on. So if you've purchased additional frameworks, similar to what I just described for this copy control functionality, the exact same thing will apply, but at the copy framework level. So all this information that you have listed in CMC level 2, you'll be able to see recommendations that we would give you for how this could cross map to something like ISO 27001 or NIST 853, for example, any other frameworks we're going to add in the future. There will still need to be a user, so like a real person that verifies that your organization does want to go through with this recommended approach for copying information from this framework over to the others. We had thought about doing automated cross-mapping. I know other platforms out there do that, but there's inherited risk that a platform would be providing to their clients simply because they want to make the process faster for them. While this will take an extra few minutes or so, or maybe a little bit longer, FutureFeed did not want to take the risk of passing on risk to any of our customers for relying on the stuff that we're going to provide to you. So you don't need to do any formal approval process for it. You just would figure the information is correct, but what if the assessor is going to interpret the control language on one control different from another? That could mean whatever is articulated in an objective or for a control of how it's being implemented might not be what you would assume it to be, or really what the assessor is looking for. That is the exact risk that we did not want to pass on to any of our customers. That's exactly why we've taken the recommended, or we give you recommendations for this form of cross-mapping. I hope that all makes sense. All right, so we're going to dive into how you can go through the gap assessment. So you have all the controls that are relevant to your framework, 110 for level 2. There are a couple of things that I'd like to make everybody aware of at a higher level. This really relates back to educational material or resources that you'll have for each of the controls. So there's guidance information that we've added to the controls. So you're able to learn more about how to understand really what this control language is, what the control is asking of you from like a source discussion perspective, how it's clarified for CMMC, and then real life examples of how the control has been implemented. And I do want to point out there are brackets here. That's referring to the objectives that this particular statement or sentence is referring to. So if it's indicating a particular list or like an authorized users list in that sentence, you know, you're going to probably need an authorized users list or a process that actually has that in place. That's going to be associated to evidence you'll need to support whatever objective it's related to. Now, if you want to double check our work on these, on like this guidance information, this is where we reference the data from. There are also baked in educational videos. So not on all 110 controls, but the majority of them. I think it's about 70 or so. And so this, at the high level, or it's sort of like the higher part of the control, it's like a video explaining the why behind the control. In this case, the why behind 3.1.1. And if you scroll down to this examine section, you'll see a video that's going to explain the evidence behind a particular control. So how your organization can go about creating or implementing the processes to then create the evidence that you need to have documented and provided to the assessor when you go through your C3PAO engagement in the future. You also need to create recurring forms of evidence for those processes as well, which in training one, we had talked about how you can set that for the different documents and tools and services through the recurring task functionality. So we've touched on the area. We did explain or dive into a little bit of the copy control functionality. So there's a set structure to the default FutureFeed tenant. It's going to start with the summary notes up top, the objectives, the potential assessment consideration statements, then the interview, examine, and then the ability to add just additional artifacts. It's additional evidence that you just want to associate to this control when it's not directly related to a particular document or tool or service. It's like the secondary way to add evidence in FutureFeed, but we give you a couple of ways. You can manage the orientation of these different sections and how they appear. You can simply drag and drop these things to the order that you would. Click the Save Changes icon, and you'll be good to go from there. Personally, I would recommend leaving the information for the interview, examine, and test in that order, because that's following the structure that the assessors are going to go through. And it's also how it appears in the SSP report as well that FutureFeed will generate for you. The potential assessment and consideration statement's up to you where you'd like to put that. It's really just an optional feature we have in here to further enhance the confidence your organization has that you've done everything to address this particular control and its requirements at the objective level. So now that we just talked about objectives, I want to describe how you can go through that process for the gap assessment in FutureFeed. So if you're just getting started in FutureFeed, your tenant is probably mostly blank, especially for the different controls. Maybe some information is in there, if so, great. But you probably aren't going to have all of the objectives met right out of the gate. If you've been preparing for this for CMMC for quite some time now, you might, fantastic. Either way, if the objective is not yet met, you're going to move this status over to not met. So that will pre-populate a POA&M item for you every single time you mark an objective as not met. Now, it's up to you if you'd like to review and maybe possibly modify the objective or the POA&M action item for this objective. But if you're going to have a lot of gaps in these objectives, it could take a lot of time to create potentially 320 different POA&M items. But how do you actually know what needs to go into this action? So we've pre-populated these items for you. Again, you can review and modify them if you'd like, but it's another way that we're trying to save you a lot of time going through the gap assessment, especially when gaps are identified. So the impact, effort, and cost ratings. So in training one or end user training one, we had touched on where you can set this in the start section. We do recommend that for every POA&M item that's created, you do set the impact, effort, cost here instead of waiting to do so when you're reviewing your POA&M items in your FutureFeed section up here on the right side of the subway map. So play a really big role, or it can play a really big role in helping you have a better sense of how you like to structure the remediation planning and then the approach to its execution, especially for how you're going to be able to group these things into projects and then execute those projects accordingly. You can set the due date for the POA&M item. If you can change it at any point in the future, if you would like, at the minimum, we recommend that somebody is listed as the accountable person for this POA&M item. Likewise, with wherever the racing model applies for an object, somebody should be listed as the accountable person at the minimum. For those that are going to be actually executing, like completing this POA&M item and like sort of resolving it, they can be listed as the responsible people. So we'll see there's responsible teams here. If you have teams created, you can select any of those teams, multiple. But if you just want individual people, click on that icon and you'll be able to see the different users that have access to the tenant. You just select them, then you'll be able to see them appear here over on the right side. Then with any people that are associated as responsible or consulted or informed, any of those selections, you'll see the blue number for how many people it's referring to. You can create custom POA&M items for any of these objects. Just simply click the add POA&M. Then whatever language you want to put in this box, you can, and then you click add. Give me one moment here. So I'd like to touch now a little bit on the summary notes, and then the objective statements. That's this box here that has a specific statement for how the objective is being implemented. The summary notes box, it's really meant to complement what is being articulated for each of the objective statements. It's that brief story or short story for how the control has been implemented. We highly recommend that you add an objective statement for each objective. That way, when the assessor is reviewing your SSP, they're not just looking at 3 to 5, 6 paragraphs worth of information. They need to spend more time just trying to identify, making sense of this data to see how objective A for 3.1.1 has been implemented. So this can be really beneficial to utilize this particular feature to the benefit of, your own visibility to knowing how all this is being done individually for the objectives, but especially for the C3PAOs or the assessors. This is also where you can add information pertaining to inheritance. So if you're working with any cloud service providers or third parties or just organizations that will be inheriting responsibilities for how the objectives are being implemented, you're able to document that here, connect that relationship. So if it's partially or fully inherited, you can simply select either one of these boxes. Let's leave it back in partially inherited. So you'll see down here below the test items. So these are the CRM. The only way that you're going to be able to select these different, or I guess the particular object to be connected to the level of inheritance is if, when we've gone over this, or this should have been, I guess, provided to you in a past training for training 1, you will need to have the CRM created in the document section, add that or associate it to the particular tool or service that's inheriting the process for the objective. And then you can also associate the vendor if you would like to. That portion is optional, but why not take an extra step to connect the relationship between the information? And then ensure that tool or service is tagged to the controls where the inheritance will apply. That will allow you to select the particular item, as you can see from the 3 that are here, versus the particular object that is here. Sort of like correct, at least what I just explained towards that last part. The tagging isn't going to completely the possibility to select this. It's the fact that tagging is done and that you also have a CRM applied. So you can see that there's no CRM here for these 2 objects. So that's how you can go through the process of really illustrating how each objective is being implemented. Likewise with setting the inheritance at the objective level. Now, I'd like to touch a little bit on how you can add this information and then modify it / update it over time. What I'm about to describe will also pertain to updating information for summary notes and then also live documentation management. So all the data you enter into those 3 different features or those functions / areas, FutureFeed is going to save that automatically for you. And I'll add a little space here for a second to update. So you can see that FutureFeed just saved this successfully. All right, great. But this is new information for the particular objective statement. Not just pretend that there's 5 different sentences here where it's important information that needs to appear. You want that to reflect as the up-to-date information. Really what that means is you need this to appear on your SSP. So you click this publish icon. What that will do is just, again, pretend with me here that we added a couple sentences. You're going to see that information appear here. All right, actually, this is training, so I'm going to add some stuff here. Sorry about that. I'm not doing that before. So that is why you're now able to see that appear here. That's going to then appear in this control for this particular objective in the SSP. Are there any particular questions about that larger concept and functionality walkthrough that I just explained, or possibly anything else that we've addressed so far during this training session? Or possibly any questions about this area in general that I might. I do see there is one thing in the chat that was put in a couple minutes ago. And so do assessors contact third parties during the assessment that are included in the SSP due to partially or fully inheriting a part of the control? Okay, so I personally don't know the answer to that. I would like to assume yes, but I don't want to give my 100% certainty. I can't speak from the lens of a C3PAO, but I can ask our new VP of compliance and education, Amy Williams, who previously came from Coal-Fire Federal, who's also a C3PAO. So she'll have that direct answer. I believe it has happened. That's essentially why that they're listed on the SSP. But please don't take my word for 100% accuracy on that. I'm going to follow up with Amy, and then Jonathan, I'll be able to send you an answer on that. If others would like to get that answer as well, please just add that in the chat. So that way I'll be able to email you as well. I think that's a really valuable question and important as well. But thank you for the question, Jonathan. All right, so we will get back to sort of like building off of the point that I just explained for keeping the information up to date through the version history, like publishing new versions. You can see here for the summary note, it's an unpublished draft. So very similar to not having the new version of this information for the objective statement. This is not, I guess the information you're seeing here in the summary note, that is not what's being reflected on the other page, or like this homepage of the control. So we need to click publish. Then when here, I guess, all right, I don't want to dwell on this, but I don't think this particular box is viewing everything, because it would really extend things a lot. That actually is the reasoning behind that. I thought I just found a bug, but thankfully no. But you just want to make sure that the information for the summary notes is updated, and so it's published last. All right, so the potential assessment consideration statements, I already touched on how it's optional. It's not going to take away from your SPURS score, but why not go through an extra step to further enhance your organization's confidence going into the assessment? It's meant to really mimic the questions or the mindset that assessors may have when going through the assessment of. And a couple other comments came in, just asked me to email them as well with that. So I will do so. Thank you. Right, so interview, examine, and test. These are the three components to the assessment process that the POA will conduct. They will need to know the people. We actually like hit on this a little bit already, but this is basically the information that you're going to be able to build out here. It will then carry over into the SSP. If the tagging is done for the tools and documents, I just want to reemphasize that's why this information would appear here by default if this is like your first time coming into the control. Right, so you might be working collaboratively with people within your own organization, or maybe a service provider, which can be like a partner of ours in FutureFeed, and you want to have internal discussions about really what's happening for at the control level, a particular objective statement. So you have the ability to create discussions for any of these different pieces of information. So this isn't going to be included on the like direct communication on the particular objects or sections in FutureFeed to help isolate the conversations, but also just keep everybody on the same page about what's happening for particular processes. We didn't go over anything yet. Does anybody have a question about going through like the gap assessment for a control before I move on from this? All right, I do see another question just came in. Great. Is there a way to get a notification when a discussion is edited? So now, I personally believe that's a gap in our system right now. I have this. I know we've gotten requests like well in the past about this as well. There will be a time in the future when that's coming, but I personally don't know when that's going. The notifications that users will get, I think that's actually a great segue into what I'm about to describe. So thank you, John. There's a couple different types of notifications that the platform will either provide to you in here or outside of the platform. So just to recap, one big point for training one, for any tasks that are going to be assigned to a user, make sure that you have for your particular preferences for your user profile, your new daily or your assignment emails set to actually occur to daily. It's either daily or never. If you're going to be assigned a task, it'd be great to know when you've been assigned that task and what it is outside of FutureFeed, instead of just having to go to your own individual responsibility dashboard every day. You still can, and we recommend that, but this is just an outside of the platform communication. Set that to daily, and then for any task that's approaching its due date within 30 days or possibly already past due, you're going to be able to have a daily email sent to you. I mean, if that would apply, and likewise for the daily email for new assignments. If you have access to multiple tenants within FutureFeed, you're going to be able to just set that setting for your user profile in one of the tenants. You don't need to do that anywhere else. That user profile setting is going to apply wherever you have access in FutureFeed. Right, so the other in-platform notifications you'll get, those are actually announcements that FutureFeed will be providing to its users. So that would appear default as a pop-up whenever you sign in to FutureFeed after we made the announcement. But you can also go back and review the ones that we've decided to leave on or like appearing for users. In this case, it's one from June 18th, indicating electronic data locations removed. I would prepare for it to be on the lookout, or it'll come to you either way when you're in FutureFeed for when we pass our FedRAMP moderate equivalent assessment, and also when we actually implement the additional frameworks we're going to do, and also adding AI documentation review, which is probably a couple of months away. I think it's going to be an add-on purchase for any subscription. To quote our CEO directly, the tentative price point for that per subscription is going to be $50 a month. It may change. That's why I said tentative. But it's we're trying to keep the cost point for that low. For annual subscriptions, I think the billing would be modified a little bit. We would address that separately with you if you'd like to purchase that. But I did want to make everybody aware of the intended like tentative price point for this $50 a month. And it's not going to be per user, it's per tenant. All right, so we've sort of gone through the assessment section, a high level and a detailed approach for like a various amount of the features. The last thing I want to emphasize is down here for the additional artifact section. This is the, think of it as like, or I personally view it as the secondary way to associate evidence to a control. Because you can add evidence to the control, but how are you going to be able to identify really how's the assessor going to be able to identify that this particular screenshot is associated to objective B? Like one, this file name, it's not indicating anything nearly specific enough that would be beneficial, at least from my perception of what the assessors would deem as valuable. I've also asked a couple of them about that, and they said that this wouldn't be enough for them and they would have to click on it to view it. It's just more time spent for this. But make sure that the way you name the evidence, which will come down to the task as you're doing this for documents and tools, is named appropriately. So everybody that's looking at the evidence is going to have an understanding of what this represents. Or if you're just going to add a file or a screenshot under this additional artifact section, I would personally recommend changing this name to something a little bit else, but you can reference like the screenshot and the date, sure, but what's it actually referring to? That will give everybody a sense of what this particular PNG image is representing. You do have the ability to tag this object to multiple controls if you would like to do so right from here. It's very similar to tagging the items in the tools and documents section. You can do so in this area as well. And so add as many artifacts as you would like. Again, it's the secondary way of adding evidence at the control level because it's not creating that direct association otherwise to a particular document and or tool or service. That's why we make a high recommendation for using the tasks functionality. And then when those tasks are completed, you'll have evidence directly associated to those objects because they're tagged to the controls. It's going to appear in the SSP accordingly. And that'd be a great segue to getting into the SSP section. And I'll touch back on the scope and system environment areas shortly. I just wanted to conclude this point about what we're looking at here. Sorry for the delay with this page popping up. So it's the exact same view as you'd see for the landing page in the assess section. You have the ability to view the status change history for the objectives. We're going to go into the first control here. So this is the exact same information that you would have been entering and would see in assess for any of the controls. That's a big way of like literally like seeing the fact that like FutureFeed will automate your SSP for you. This is a live interactable version of the SSP, so you can make changes here. I haven't really seen that happen much, but we give you that flexibility. Or the feature functionality flexibility, the triple F there. The race model information for the interview section, and then really the breakdown of what's happening at the objective level. It's a little bit of a different view here, but ideally you'd like to have all of your objectives marked as met. So that's why you're going to see that information appear down here in the screen section. This is a view of that objective statement. It's literally the exact same box that we were looking at in the assess section for this control. Now you do have the ability to give your assessors assessor access, or the user type for assessors, so access into your tenant. They're not going to be able to edit anything. It's only read-only mode to your SSP, like your live SSP. So they can be able to have that same click-through functionality to interact with your data. Again, not changing anything. but having a better way to actually see everything and get the information that is most important to what they're trying to review, and then hopefully, ideally, marking the control is met, especially for all the objectives. If you don't want to give the assessors access to your tech, want to mention that you can the latest version of your SSP, but for all the documents and pieces of evidence, just export something that we call the evidence file report. It's a zip file of all the documents and pieces of evidence and uploaded artifacts. If you did so at the control level, for example, that will appear in a zip file. So they'll still have the full traceability matrix. They just need to go through a different sense of actually viewing the information instead of clicking on the documents or the evidence in this live version of the SSP. All right, the potential assessment consideration and outcome statements are here. So if you've gone through the process of tagging the tools and documents, this is why you're seeing the output of the information here. And I'll just briefly show you how you can actually see the associated evidence to the particular items. And for those of you that were on Tuesday's end user training 1, we did go through this portion. So I apologize for the duplicate process for this, but it's really important that users understand what this information, why it's looking the way it does and how this will benefit you for the assessment, or I believe so. All right, so are there any questions about this primary section of the control layout for the SSP? Just take a sip of water here for a moment. All right, so with all the controls, somebody within your organization is going to need to go through the formal review process, ensuring all this information is accurate and they feel very confident that it's everything that needs to be illustrated here. That's where this checkbox will come into play. Who actually reviewed this? In this case, on August 12th, I went in here and reviewed it. If I was the authoritative person within sample company, it's this demo environment that we're in, it's important that this is documented here so that is visible, especially on the SSP as well. But if I were to take this off and then, sorry, looks like my internet is just being slow again, so that might just take a second to load. Either way, I can select that off, and then the next person that goes to review it, or even if I do it again, you're then going to be seeing an additional entry for the person that reviewed this control. So we don't want to push a set structure for the SSP on customers, and we've been working on this for a while. We've got a lot of feedback on this. So you have the ability to customize your SSP content and also the format. So for the SSP format, all of these different boxes with their associated categories and all these different eyeball icons, that means all of this information is enabled and will be visible in the SSP report, at least the one that you would export afterwards. If you don't want to have any of this information in there, I'm not going to get into why you should not disable any of this stuff. It's not my, I should not be the one to give advice on that for this, but all of these will be enabled by default. And then you are able to copy the settings from anything in the assessor view. Likewise with company defaults. For customizing the SSP format, this is related, or the SSP itself, it came from the formatting perspective. I do apologize if I said SSP format when I was showing the previous section. That was for SSP content. So now we're getting into the SSP format. So you can have your current settings that are illustrated here, and then for the assessor report, and then also just the general company defaults. But this is where you can decide to disable your partner, your service provider's name or logo from appearing on your SSP. Likewise with your own company's name or logo. Probably wouldn't make sense to do that, but we did want to exclude that option in case for some reason somebody wants to. Then there are by default images within your SSP that could take up a lot of space on a page and then extending the length of the SSP. Simply just click on this icon to have them be taken out, and you'll see this change here, or you can click back on it to then have this be done. You can modify your title as well, and also the subtitle for your SSP, and likewise with anything related to the confidentiality notice that you'd like to incorporate. Was there a question? Or maybe that might have been a sneeze. If so, bless you. All right, so this is the primary bulk of the SSP for each of the controls. I'm gonna just get into the scope section. So a lot of the information that you've entered in the start section, that is going to play a role and also for some of the information in the tool section, that's going to play a role in populating the information here. So for the system information, these are just the general, like 3 different things or 3 small little areas that you can edit information, or where you'll be able to see the information. Sorry. It's been a long day of meetings for me, so English can get a little bit difficult towards the later part of the day. So you're seeing all this information appear here because it's coming from the other sections of FutureFeed, but this is all coming from that start section. What if you want to enter this information, or sorry, edit the information? Click on the pencil icon. You're going to be brought straight back into that section of FutureFeed. All right, so I made a mistake a second ago. This was taking you into the people section for roles. By the way, the platform will guide you to the right spot. And for organization, we already went into organization information. For system description, likewise with system details and data inventory, just for system description, this is also going to be coming from other areas within the platform. But for system details and data inventory, this is like the one specific area in the SSP when, if you hadn't done so already for your tools and services, like if you didn't add the count for end users and admins, you're going to be able to do so here. So if you didn't do so before, it's a smaller feature visibility in the tool and service section for those items. You might see some icons here for the items that still need their counts applied. So I'll just add a 1 here for that, and you'll see that like change to a green check mark. And you're able to set this to being reviewed as well. Right. So if we scroll down, it's for any items that are in the pending status. You'll have a little bit of a different view, but it's going to show you the relevant information that you'll be able to edit. For the data inventory, so for the FCI and the CUI associations for either the tools and services to store or transmit FCI or something that's categorized as a CUI asset, you're going to be able to see those associations here. So all the work that you were doing before in the tools and services section, despite that being a smaller feature, is still very powerful and will need to appear on your SSP accurately. That will be in one of the earlier sections of how the SSP is structured. In system environment, so if these approximate counts haven't been filled out yet, you will need to go through the default items that appear under user devices for servers, and then adding the approximate count. And if any have reached their end of life, so if I've got like 1 here for server 2000, which is 15 years out of date, you're going to see a little caution icon here, and that will also appear back above. So you're going to need to replace that or with something that is more up to date. And I won't get into the technical processes for that, but your IT department or your IT manager will be able to support that. Likewise, the same process for virtual servers, the information pertaining to that, and then scroll down and you'll see more information for network devices. And that's going to encapsulate everything here. And I do want to point out there might be more than one checkbox on a page within the SSP or like the section of this. So you will need to have somebody go through the review process of that and just check the boxes to ensure that is done. We touched on topology for hardware and software. 2 of the required documents that you'll be needing to complete in the document section, that is your SSP software inventory list and then the SSP hardware inventory list. Now, if you don't have that in the tenant yet, you're going to see the one next to these 2 sections. You'll just go into the, as you find the document listing in here, it'll be under the list section, and you'll be able to fill out that information. And for the 4 maintenance questions that you would have been asked in the earlier section of FutureFeed or the start section, that information will be reflected here. So everything that we've gone through, it just like summarizes how you can view and understand the structure of the SSP, but you can also edit the information if you would like. Just want to reemphasize, if you do give any member of a C3PO or an assessor access as an assessor, or that assessor user type, they're only going to have read-only view to the compliance dashboard page and the SSP. Are there any questions about the SSP structure or format that I can address for anybody? Okay, all right, we're making a pretty good pace, so you all might get a few minutes back in your afternoons today, in case we do end a little early. Okay, so for the year future, these are where your projects. So whenever you're going through the process, adding poem items in FutureFeed, or you're creating them, be happening in any of the sections up here on the subway map. We do recommend setting the impact, effort, and cost, so you don't need to do so later on. But this is a really great way for you to utilize a filtering function to actually segment or condense the amount of poem items you're looking at that could be related to assessment objectives, those that refer to certain documents or types of documents, really anything related to any of the other selections that you can make for the different column headers that you're seeing here in the middle part of your screen. Now, you have the visibility to the poem items here. You can choose to go about addressing them individually. That would probably take a little bit more time, or there's not a lot of structure to that unless you want to just reorient the order to these. Is once the impact, effort, and cost ratings are set and the due date is there as well, you can then also ensure that somebody's listed as the accountable person for these things. Group these into projects, or create projects and then group the poem items into them. Now, you might not know initially how many poem items or which poem items are going to be a part of the projects you'll create. So you have the ability to place poem items into multiple projects. As you can see, this particular poem item is part of 5 projects. It's because you're going through this draft planning process. But you do have the ability, just by clicking one button in a particular project, to actually confirm the selection of the poem items that will automatically take this poem item out of the other projects that it wasn't solidified, in. So you can view the projects that are associated to the poem items here. I will take you through how you can view the projects and also better understand what they're setting out to accomplish. So you can create projects through whatever types of means that you would like. FutureFeed isn't going to tell you you need to do it this way, or if you don't, it's wrong. We're going information so you can have a better approach this process for your organization, but then executing the projects. We'll jump into one of these projects here. I do want to touch on for a moment information you're looking at atop or on top of this is referring to. So this is the cumulative impact, effort, and cost for what this project is providing to an organization, or really representing. And then also the cumulative SPUR score as well. Lawrence, I did see your question just came in. So just give me one moment to finish this point, and then I'll read through that and happily address it. So the information up top, it's really pertaining to all the different poem items that are part of this group here. You will need to individually mark the poem items as met or completed. You won't have the ability to do that in a group sense because you'll need to add implementation or a justification statement for the poem items. But when I was talking about how if you have a poem item that's a part of multiple projects, you can set the start date for the project. And if it's going to be tomorrow, once that day arises, or October 10th comes around, or you can literally just click the box here without setting the start date, as I just did. That's going to be able to lock these poem items into this project and then automatically remove it from the others. You can also, and then sort of go through that drafting process again. As you're going through the different phases of addressing or completing a project, make sure to mark them as, instead of it's just accepted, we're now in progress, this is an action. That is going to move the poem items that are in over here, or visible over here, into that selection for the in progress poem items. So you can view, these are all the ones that are pending. They're going to be done at some point in the future, relevant to the due dates here. But the ones that are we're actually in the process of addressing, those are visible right here. And those that have been completed, you're able to view them here as well. It's valuable for whether you're the end user perspective representing an OSC, or you might be representing a service provider. I'm sure there's both types of organizations here on this call right now. This impact, effort, and cost rating and the amount of SPUR score increase that you can completing this project, you can think of this as like a quick hitter project. So this project has a really high level of impact to the organization because of the amount of SPUR score that they'll get as a result of completing this. It's not going to require the organization a lot of time, so the level of effort and the cost of completing this project is going to be pretty low. So this quick hitter project is sort of, if you're looking to provide like a plan for how your Spurs score that might be a negative 34 today, as we're going with the sample company example. So then you're going to spend the next 3, 5, 6 months or however long it takes to get to 110. Your executives or managers might want to see, or probably would want to see, the fact that this is going to be some really big steps taken initially, but especially in relation to getting the organization to a 110 Spurs score. So you can do these quick hitter projects first and then focus on the projects later on that might take more time, might accumulate more level of Spurs score increase. Now, I've seen that be really successful for organizations. It's also something I recommend as well, but it's up to you to how you want to go about executing these projects and structuring out what's going to be done first as opposed to later. So you can completely flip-flop the example that I just explained. Again, it's up to you to make that decision. We're just trying to do high-level information to then approach how you'd like to structure this out. There are other areas within the project that you're able to just add the description or descriptor information for. I would make a reference to the start date and the end date, and then the RACI model for the project, who's accountable for it overall, and the people that are going to be executing the project. So the individual POA items, and if people need to be consulted or informed about this, they're going to be documented here as well, if it would be necessary. All right, you do have the ability to add project price if you would like. It's optional, so it's not it's not a requirement, but why not take advantage of an optional feature within the platform? It's just giving you more of a sense of everything related to this project, but especially for cost. You can add any associated documentation that might be related to this project. It's up to you to determine what those documents would be, or even screenshots, images, etc. All right, so we've gone through your FutureFeed section. Before we get into the deliverables for the last couple of minutes, just want to pause again to address Lawrence's question. Just give me one moment here. So when starting a new assessment using FutureFeed, is there a recommended order to start going through and entering the data? For example, or I think you meant example, the 4 phases of the CMC assessment process, is there a phased approach in FocusFeed for phase 1 and 2? Give me a second to digest the question. So I'll take this from the data entry perspective. So this is depending on what phase of the process your organization is in, not using FutureFeed, especially if you are new to the platform, but how much information your organization has already. So like, do you have your documentation templates? Do you know your different tools and services? Who are the people that are a part of this process? Do you know this information? But instead of just knowing it, do you have that like in a file somewhere, multiple files and folders? If you don't have the majority of that stuff, personally, I would recommend just going through the start section and the people section first, and then left to right on the subway map. But you can also just jump straight into the gap assessment. And when you're identifying that you might not have an access control policy, for example, at that point in 3.1.1 or whatever other controls it relates to, you can then go into the document section and create that document. So you can sort of combine the efforts of what would be entered into these different sections here together. But as you're going through the controls within the gap assessment, those are primarily the 2 ways. I think somebody just put an image in here. I'll pull that up. So is Jonathan, is this what somebody had created for the recommended approach of going through the various controls in a certain order? If you can just like say yes or no, or just write a yes or no in the chat. If so, I think this would be really valuable for image for people to have. Okay, yes. Well, thank you very much for providing this. So everybody that's here, it's in the chat. But Lawrence, this would the other thing that I will touch on is for so it's the 3 phases of the assessment, really just how the assessment unfolds, honestly. Oh, it's from FutureFeed. It's a little embarrassing. It's either in the platform somewhere, maybe in our knowledge base, but thank you very much for finding that and putting it in here. Always appreciate we get additional assistance for that. I think it's a really valuable thing. Now I'm gonna go back and figure out where that was. It's probably one of the earlier sections. Okay, I don't want to derail on that. It's a little funny. So for there's different stages of the different of the assessment. For interview, examine, and test, it's going to be in order of how this is illustrated in like your live SSP, but that is also appearing in assess. So make sure that you have the information that's relevant to these sections. So I can't speak for the C3PAOs for how they specifically will go through their assessment of every control. I don't want to assume that every C3PAO operates the exact same 100% way, but I'm probably going to stop myself from adding more information to that. When you're going to be engaging with a C3PAO or not engaging with them, we're doing C3PAO shopping to identify one you want to work with in the future. Welcome to ask them that. I'm sure they'd be happy to tell or just give you like their perspective on this. But there might be, other organizations out there that have made articles on this. I don't know who particularly that would be, but there's probably information out there within the ecosystem or this community that would be able to provide that for you if you'd like to learn a little bit more about that. All right. So are there any other questions in general about FutureFeed or the stuff that we've gone through during this training session? We've got about 4 minutes or so left, so now's the time to ask. You can unmute and ask away, or you can just add information in the chat. Either would be good. And in case anybody's typing something up, in the meantime, I just want to reemphasize that this session has been recorded, and once the meeting is over, just in probably an hour or two from now, expect a follow-up email from Zoom that will send you the recording itself. Please reach out to support@futurefeed.co. We'll be happy to fix that for you. Hopefully there really shouldn't be an issue, but you never know with technology sometimes. My name is Chase Berman. I am our success manager. I really look forward to working with all of you and supporting you throughout your compliance journey. If you do submit a support ticket in the future, there's a chance you'll hear from me. If you have any sales inquiries, you're probably going to hear from me on those, since I lead and direct the majority on our sales side. But again, our organization is here to help you throughout your entire compliance journey. And I'd like to thank everybody personally for just your time this afternoon. I really do appreciate it. There were some great questions that were asked. Jonathan, thank you very much for providing that image. That was really wonderful. And again, I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your week, and the recording will be sent later on. Happy to help however we can in the future. If you do want to register and attend future training, there is no and never will be an additional cost for that. And I say never will be, and I know this is recorded, so hold me to that if that ever changes, but I will work my butt off to ensure that never happens as our company success manager. It wouldn't be right for us to do. So you can attend as many future training sessions as you would like, and it'll be our pleasure to engage with you there and however else we will throughout your journey of using FutureFeed. And thank you all very much, and have a good rest of your day. And enjoy the 2 extra minutes you get in your afternoon.